Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Terramina.
Welcome to OAA Now. Here I'm Sammy Terramina, blogger of the Dragons Den, blogger of the Dragons, blogger of the Dragons Insider, blogger of the new Sammy State blog, and also the blogger of Inside the OAA, and one of the hosts between Termina's and Orion Television. Like, welcome our friends hearing us on the local voice on SoundCloud, and also those watching us on Orion Neighborhood Television. We got a very good show to talk about this week. A lot of football recaps, and of course, looking at the previews heading into Week 4, which I call as Rivalry Week. A lot of action occurred for Week 3, recapping a lot of the football action. Of course, we've also had a lot of volleyball action as well. But we're going to talk football a lot today. And I think, there was a lot of teams, of course, who played very well on Friday night, and also some teams that, of course, we had that one game Saturday night, of course, with Lake Orion Rochester Adams because of the power outage situation occurring from last Friday's storms. So we'll recap all those games, and of course, we'll preview also the rivalry weeks for football as well. So let's look at the Week 3 recap. Of course, when you look at the games this week, of course, when you look at Week 3, and if you're 3-0, you're in a really good spot. If you're 2-1, you're okay. If you're 1-2, you're you got some work to do, and then if you're 0-3, you could be in some trouble. So when you look at the teams that from last week, I've been really impressed with. Of course, Groves had no problem with Rochester. Of course, Rochester's defense has been in shambles. Groves beat Rochester 42-0. Groves just used the Rochester game as a prep to get ready for this week's game with Oak Park. And I think when you look at Groves, you have Marcus Alexander, you have Kobe Taylor. Of course, those two guys had really big games against Rochester. So when I look at Groves, this is a team that they're going to be a very dangerous team. And this is a football team that I think is going to be, and a lot of people look at this game with Oak Park going to be the white title. And I think, Groves looking very impressive right now. But we're going to see what they're made of, especially with Oak Park. I mean, speaking of Oak Park, I got to get this off my chest. I really got to get this one off my chest, and it's the Clarkson defense. This is the first time that I've seen Clarkson give up over 60. I have never seen a Clarkson defense give up over 60. And they gave up 64 to Oak Park. Now, yes, the game was a lot closer than people thought it was. But Oak Park put up 60 on them. 60. And I think there's a lot of problems with Clarkson. I really think that there is a lot of trouble with that program brewing. And I think that's behind the scenes. I know when you look at Clarkston, this team really needs Garrett Dillinger to play both sides of the ball, not just on the offensive side of the ball. And I know all the politicking going on around there. I know what's going on over there. But when you look at Clarkston right now, they've got some problems. They really do have problems. And I think when you look at the Wolves defensively, this is a team that they gave up 28 to A&T, 7 to Bloomfield Hills, and now 64 to Oak Park. That's insane. That's insane. That's 99 points in 3 games. That's just insane. And now you got to look at Clarkson's schedule. They got West Bloomfield this week in the Swamp. That's gonna be a very tough game. And then you got to play. And you still got to play Southfield, Oxford, Lake Orion, and Adams. Those are 4 not easy games. And the fact that now you got to look at possibly, you got to look at, and you only playing 8 games. That's tough. especially because now you have got your back behind the wall. Yes, Mike DePillo had a really good game. Yes, Matt Miller had a really good game. Yes, Parkinson had a good game. But you got a big problem on that defensive side of the football. And you got some good offenses you got to still play. And you have got, and I think personally, you've got to put Garen Dillinger on the defensive side of the ball. You got to make him play both ways. Because if you don't, I don't know if this team's going to be a playoff team. People have asked me about Clarkson. People have told me about Clarkson. What's going on with the Wolves? I mean, I can tell you what's going on right now. I mean, they're scoring. They're scoring a lot. They're just giving up a lot. And they're in a tough spot right now. I think Clarkson's in a really tough spot. They're in a lot of trouble right now. Let's look at Oak Park. Oak Park's a team that I think the Knights are in a really, really good position right now. Their quarterback situation, I worried about before the season started. Now Frank Black has taken over the reins there, and he has done a wonderful job. He has put his stamp on the opposite side of football. That says a lot. That really says a lot. And of course you have players like Enzo Jennings. You have this Oak Park team. They're very good. They are very good. And that Groves Oak Park game in Night Valley this week, that's going to be really insane. That's going to be really insane. I mean, but if I'm Coach Greg Carter, I got to address that defense a little bit. 41's too much. 41 points is too much. What saved Oak Park in that game was the fact that they scored 27 unanswered points. That was the difference. They put up 24 unanswered points. That was your difference. And Oak Park cannot have that, especially against a team like Groves, who's a very good defensive team, well coached under Brendan Flaherty. If you're Oak Park, you got to clean that up. You really got to clean that up. A teams that I've been really impressed with also has been Stony Creek. Stony Creek, after a really tough loss to Seaholm 2 weeks ago, I mean they have found their way back. They are 2-1. I mean, now yes, they got a tough schedule brewing, but they're 2-1, looking really good right now. Just blew out Troy Athens 42-7 on their home field. Wearing I believe Dutton Farms jerseys they were wearing. So when I look at Stony Creek, this is a good football team. This is a very good football team. They work hard. And I think that's a huge credit to Nick Merlo. Nick Merlo has put his stamp on this program and on this school. He brought in the Armor Up community. He brought in the Armor Up team. And the kids, the community have bought in. They bought in. I really like Eckhout, their quarterback. I think Eckhout is a really good player. He has done a wonderful, wonderful job. And of course you have Zach Denna. I believe their running back. He's done a really good job as well. He's had some big games as well. But I think Denna, Eckhout has done a wonderful job with Stony Creek. They bought into the Armor Up culture, and Stony Creek right now is reaping the benefits. Now, people are going to ask me, well, who has Stony Creek played? Who has Stony Creek played? They beat Utica Ford, who just beat Utica the other night. And then you beat Troy Athens. Of course, Troy Athens, people are going to say, well, Troy Athens' schedule was not as strong. That's true, but, for Stony Creek, it's a good spot for them. This week they got Troy, and that's going to be a really interesting game right there. When I look at the Colts, they've got some problems. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But Stony Creek, this is a team that really has everything going. And if they have everything going on all cylinders, especially in that back end of the schedule, which is going to be really difficult because you got to play because they've got to play Groves, Oak Park, Oxford, and Adams. That's not going to be easy for Stony Creek. And then he's got Rochester as well in there. And of course, Rochester and Stony Creek, that's a game. I know that Merlo's schedule is circled because that's his return back to Rochester, where he was an assistant and he taught it at and he also taught at Rochester. So that's going to be really interesting when Stony Creek plays Rochester. Let's look at other teams here. I mentioned let's look at the a team I was really disappointed with was Berkeley. Berkeley really infuriated me with the way they played on Friday night against Royal Oak. I didn't think Berkeley had a good game plan against Royal Oak. I mean, I was disappointed in Sean Shields' game plan. I was really disappointed. But Royal Oak had a ton of injuries coming in that game. And the fact that I thought Berkeley played a more tougher schedule than Royal Oak. They did. And this team just let them off the hook. You let them score 17. I mean, and the fact that you're now 0-3, you got to go to Pontiac Notre Dame Prep, who just put 38 on Dearborn Divine Child. That's brutal. That's tough. It's going to be tough. So it's hard for me to describe Berkeley right now. Really hard to describe Berkeley right now. Avondale looks very good. They blew up Pontiac 52-0. Yeah, I really don't see any issues with the Yellow Jackets. Corey Bell's done a wonderful job with that team. Really don't see any issues. Pontiac, I just feel bad for. I mean, I just feel bad for them. I just do. They're just moving along. You know what I mean? That's all I got to do. That's all I got to do. So I feel bad for Pontiac. I really do. Avondale, as mentioned, of course, in that game, it was domination by the Yellow Jackets, just straight out domination. But Pontiac did have some bright moments. So I got to give Pontiac a lot of credit. They had some bright moments in that game. But Avondale showing why they could spoil the Farmington party. They could spoil it, When I look at North Farmington, I really wasn't impressed with them against Ferndale. North Farmington won 22-0. The Raiders 3-0, I think, for the first time, I believe, since 2003. That says a lot. Where that program's been. Ferndale, I think, is in a lot of trouble when you look at the Eagles. I mean, this is a football team that's got some big, big problems. I mean, I said Ferndale last week with Ian and myself, they had to win this game. They had to win this game. They didn't. So now they sit at 1-2 in real danger. They're in real danger missing the playoffs. And I know Eric Royal. I know Eric Royal. I mean, they have to win this week's game at Farmington. They have to win that game. If not, especially with that schedule, having them play Allen Park, Birmingham Detroit Country Day, and then Avondale on the plate. That's not going to be easy. That's not going to be easy for Ferndale. That's really not. When I look at the blue, of course, we talked North Farmington a little bit. I talked to Avondale. The team that I was really most impressed with in the blue this week was Farmington. Farmington went down to Ypsilanti. They went down there, played Ypsi Lincoln, played them tough, beat them 35-14. They shut the running back down, which was very huge because he was very instrumental in their 2 wins against Adrian Tecumseh. So when I look at Farmington, they got a 2-quarterback system with Steve Guerrero and Max Martin. Martin's had a really big impact with that team. And And in this game, they played without Jordan Turner, who had a foot injury. That says a lot about where Coach Corey Schroeder's team's been. They're 3-0, looking really good right now. They go back in the league play Ferndale this week. Farmington's a team that if Ypsilanti Lincoln keeps winning games, I think that'll help them come playoff time. Now, when I look at possible playoff scenarios, and we'll go over that in a couple weeks, because when I'm looking at that blue right now, and I'm looking at that blue division, and I don't know if the blue's going to get teams like North Farmington, Avondale ready. I just don't know if they're going to get them ready. Because when I look at that blue right now, there's clearly 3 playoff teams. Clearly right now. And that is Farmington, North Farmington, and Avondale. Those are 3 teams right now. I mean, when I look at those teams, and when I look at Pontiac struggling, Royal Oak's been struggling, Berkeley's struggling. Those 3 teams, they've really struggled. And of course Ferndale's also struggling. So, and that's saying a lot right now. When you look at the blue right now, it's basically a 3-team race between Farmington, North Farmington, and Avondale. So I'm curious to see how that division is going to play out. The white, basically, it's Groves and Oak Park. I mean, it's Groves and Oak Park basically playing. It's those 2 teams, and then it's everybody else. I mean, Stony Creek's a team that Seaholm's clearly your 3rd place team. Seaholm I've been really impressed with. Beat Troy 44-0. Seaholm's a team that they don't have a lot of depth, but the players they have are very, very good. And I think that's a credit Coach Jim Dewall on this team. I think it's a huge credit to where that team's been. Now, they played that game at 8 o'clock on Friday. It was Troy's homecoming. So when I look at Seaholm, they got Rochester this week. I don't think there's going to be any issue with them. I really don't think that. Speaking of Rochester, I can understand Rochester's played 3 tough opponents. I can understand that. They played Adams, they played Groves, they played Oak Park. Now you got Seaholm, and then you still got to play Lake Orion and Stony Creek. My Lord, that's not easy. That is not an easy slate. I mean, it's hard to describe how many points Rochester's been giving up. It's hard to describe. When you look at with Adams week 1, they gave over 60. Week 2, they gave up 53. And then last week, 42. So, and now you got Seaholm, who's a mirror image of Adams. They're just a mirror image of Adams. I think Coach Eric Vernon's team's got problems defensively. So we're going to see what happens with Rochester. But this is a must-win game for Rochester. And it's going to be a tough task. It clearly is going to be a very tough task. Let's talk Troy now. I mean, I don't know what to say about this team. The fact that they have not scored a point this year. They are giving up a ton of points. It's hard to describe. When you look at that offense, they have not scored. They have not scored a point. And you still got to play Oak Park. You still got to play Groves. And you still got to play, that's brutal. That's brutal. Troy's in a really tough spot. They really are. And I know that team. I know Coach Chris Frazier's trying to do the best he can with that team, but they have got to find something offensively. They have got to. I mean, 3 games without scoring a point, it's hard. And I can imagine how those kids at Troy High are feeling, especially the football players. They've got to be just sick to their stomach. They've got to find something. They've got to find something that can that can just get them motivated. They've got to. I mean, you look at the school up the road on John R. and Troy Athens. They've got something. And then last week it came out back to earth with Troy Athens. I mean, Troy. They've got to find a place where they are comfortable, and if they can find it, who knows where this team's going to go? Who knows? But Troy, they're in a tough spot. Really, really tough spot. Let's go Troy Athens. Of course, we mentioned everything was going good for Troy Athens until last week, some 42-7 debacle of Stony Creek. It's hard to describe what happened that game. Everything just went wrong for the Red Hawks in that game. Everything just went wrong. So when I look at Athens, this is a team, they got 2 wins right now, but I think if you're Coach Billy Keenis, you got to be very careful. You got to be very careful with this team because Troy Athens, they've got a tough schedule coming up. They still got to play Groves, Oak Park. They got Pontiac Northern Prep to close out the year. That's going to be a very tough game. But I think right now Oak Park's in a really, really tough spot. Athens in a really tough spot. If they can get, and they got a tough one with A&T this week. We're going to talk Red in a minute. But with Athens, I think it's a team that's got. I think they got to keep trusting Billy Keenis in the process. They got to keep trusting him. If they can, I think they're going to be fine. But they've got to let this last week's game go. They got to let this game go and focus on A&T. I know people at Troy Athens are going to say, "Whoa, A&T, they got all these athletes, you know what I mean, that they're tough to beat." Please. Athens has a chance in this game. They have a chance in this game. I mean, they're going to have to play well, but we're going to see what happens. But if I'm Athens, I'm not pressing the panic button. I really am not. So my thoughts on the white are this: Groves, Oak Park are the two front runners. You have Seaholm third, Stony Creek fourth. I think Athens fifth, Rochester sixth, Troy 7 right now. That's very interesting. That is a really interesting spot. But we'll see what happens. Let's go to the Red. I talked Clarkson earlier a little bit with their defense. And of course, the defense lost 64 points last week to Oak Park. They have a very tough schedule looming. When I look at the games recap last week, I thought the Lake Orion Adams game was a really good game. I thought the officiating was really bad, especially against Lake Orion. But when I look at Lake Orion, this is a team that has found some balance. They found some balance. When you look at, of course, you have Blaze Lauer at quarterback. You have Kobe Mansell running the ball. You have Drew Van Heck with a huge game against Adams. But if there's a kid you got to watch, it's Sam Sterich. I think Sam Sterich is going to have an impact. He hasn't had a big game yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And also Mitchell Howell's had a big game. He's had a couple big games as well. So, but when I look at Lake Orion, this offense last 2 weeks has averaged over 37 points a game. Actually, take that back. Not 37 points a game. They've averaged 36.5 points a game. That's in 2 games. That's very good. That is very good. Defensively, with this group, kind of want to give them a pass for week 3. The The 31 points, a little too much, but I think defensively, this team's going to be fine. I think that defensively, this defense right now, yes, they've got to fix some things on that side of the football, but, it's hard to defend a Veer. It is very hard to defend a Veer. So give Lake Orion's defense a pass. I give him a pass. Adams, when you look at Adams, their score, I was surprised Anthony Petrino came back and played in that game. I was really surprised. Of course, last week he was taken out. Last week he was taken out on a stretcher. Against Oxford, he was taken out on a stretcher. Now he comes back and plays this week. He got a touchdown in that game. But when I look at Adams, I'm not pressing the panic button on this team. I'm not pressing the panic button on Rochester Adams because this is a football team I think is going to make some noise. And especially if this team, when I look at Adams, this is clearly a playoff team in my mind. Yes, they got a very tough schedule. They've got to go to A&T. They got Clarkson coming to Adams. They have, and of course, they do close out with Stony Creek on the road. So when I look at, and they have to go to West Bloomfield. So a tough slate looming for Adams. But anytime you got to deal with that Veer, it is so hard to defend. It is very hard to defend. Now, what I didn't like was Petrino's antics to Paul Apache. I really didn't like him. I really didn't like the antics. But at the end of the day, you're 2-1, you're fine. You got Bloomfield Hills this week. We're gonna preview the week 4 games coming up, but I'm not pressing the panic button on Adams. Really, I'm not. Let's look at Oxford now. Oxford sits at 1-2. Big game for them this week. Your home opener against Lake Orion. Drew Carpenter played some running back along with Michael Pullman. Of course, Oxford relying on Pound the Rock. Of course, making the move with Brody Carpenter playing quarterback. That's very interesting. Curious to see how that experience is going to work. Now, yes, Oxford sits at 1-2, but don't press the panic button on the Wildcats. I think it's a fine football team. I think they're going to be fine. When I look at Oxford, the schedule is going to get really tough. You got to play West Bloomfield. They got West Bloomfield at home. They got to go to Southfield. They got to go to Oak Park. That's not going to be easy games. And then you got Stony Creek also coming to Oxford. So when I look at Oxford, the tough part of their schedule is coming up. And it starts this week with Lake Orion. It's going to be very interesting in that one. Yes, they played a really tough schedule. Of course, they played Romeo. Romeo's a very good team. Adams, we know what they have. And then last week, of course, winning 42-21 over Bloomfield Hills. They still got some issues that they got to address. But I think on the long term, I think Oxford's going to be a team nobody wants to see. I really think so. Let's look at Bloomfield Hills now. Bloomfield Hills is a team that, yes, they lost Tanner Sozinski. He got hurt. He was carted off. But prior to that, Bloomfield Hills looked very good. They had Sozinski had a huge touchdown to Alec Ward early. They also had a couple big runs for touchdowns. So when I look at Bloomfield Hills, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to them. They got Adams this week. That's going to be a very tough matchup, especially if Sosinski cannot go against Adams. If Bloomfield Hills, especially because its schedule looming is very difficult. As mentioned. And I think this team could be this is a very interesting team to keep on. Very, very interesting team. They really are. Let's go from Bowie Hills to West Bloomfield. West Bloomfield picked up a big 17-8 win over A&T the other game on Friday night. Penalty-filled game. I think Southfield A&T is probably the most undisciplined team I've seen. Very undisciplined. I was reading Twitter and just was astonished how many penalties both teams committed, especially on A&T's part. Because when you look at you got to have discipline if you want to be a playoff team, you got to have discipline. You got to have discipline. And when I look at A&T in particular, not as much the case of West Bloomfield, but A&T especially, you gotta keep your emotions in check. You gotta make sure. You gotta also understand, you can't afford these type of penalties because these are penalties that are gonna come back and bite you. And when I look at A&T's case, the penalties have hurt them. It hurt them in the loss to Lake Orion, and it hurt them in the loss to West Bloomfield. A&T scored 15 points in 2 weeks. They scored 28 against Clarkston. So that tells me this team's got issues. This team's got some problems. They've got to address those. West Bloomfield's case, 17 points, it's hard. Any league win is huge for West Bloomfield. But you're going to have to score more than 17 against Clarkson. And I know Coach Ron Bellamy. They're going to take Clarkson extremely seriously because West Bloomfield has lost to Clarkson in the last 2 years. So when I look at West Bloomfield, I think West Bloomfield's in a better spot right now. Yes, they're 2-1, but I think they're fine. I won't press the panic button on them. So those are my thoughts on all 21 teams right now as we speak. Recapping what happened last week. I want to preview the week 4 games heading into the week. I'm going to go from the blue, then the white, and the red. The first game we're going to start with is Berkeley at Pontiac Notre Dame Prep. Pontiac Notre Dame Prep looked very good last week. They looked very good in a 38-0 win against Hubert Devonshire. They got a very good quarterback. Berkeley, I don't know where they're at. I really don't know where this team is at right now. I really do not know where they are at. And the Berkeley Bears, they lost to Royal Oak last week, 17-7. And now you got to go on the road and play a Pontiac Notre Dame Prep team that is hungry after missing the playoffs last year, finishing 4-5. And you're on the road. That's not going to be an easy slate. So when I look at Berkeley right now, I think they're in some trouble heading down there to Pontiac to take on Pontiac Notre Dame Prep. Actually, they're heading up there to Pontiac, take on Pontiac Notre Dame Prep. I think Berkeley's got some problems right now. I really do. Let's look at another game we got is Avondale taking on Royal Oak. Game's at Royal Oak. This one could be a sneaky good game. And the reason why I say a sneaky good game is because Royal Oaks played Avondale tough. Avondale's got a lot of athletes when you look at of course, with what they've got. Royal Oaks coming off a 17-7 win against Berkeley. But I think Avondale and Berkeley are two different opponents for Royal Oak. I really think so. Avondale is coming off a win against Pontiac, beat Troy. I think this is going to be a test to see where they're at. Royal Oak, they played Lakeview, got whooped in that one. Got whooped by North Farmington. And then of course last week win against Berkeley. So When I look at Royal Oak, I think this is a bar game for them. I really think this is like to see where they're at. If they're trending up, if they're trending down. And I think, especially playing against a team like Avondale, we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see what happens there. Another game to keep an eye on is Farmington and Ferndale. For Ferndale, this is a extremely must-win game for them. Farmington is coming off a big win at Ypsilanti Lincoln without Jordan Turner. Now they're back home, back in league competition, and this is a team that is very dangerous right now. And if you're Ferndale, you've got to find some sort of offense. You've got to find an offense. If you can find an offense in that game, I'm going to tell you, I think that if Ferndale can find some offense, especially at the receiving core, I think this team's going to be fine. Yes, they got a very tough schedule looming. And yes, Farmington's got a heck of a defense. It's going to be a tough task. But if you're Eric Royal, you've been here before. You've played against the likes of Detroit Martin Luther King. You've played the likes of Oak Park. You've played the likes of Warren DSL. Those three teams, you've played them. You've seen them. So you know what you're going to be going through. You got your backs against the wall, and now you got to play. You're going to have to come out and play. Because your schedule is very brutal after your schedule is going to be very, very brutal. You still got to play Avondale. You got to play Allen Park. You got to play the Birmingham Detroit Country. Those are three not easy games. Farmington, we know where they're at. They got two big games looming. Two of them. They got Avondale, and then they got North Farmington. Speaking of North Farmington, they play Pontiac this week. At Wisner. I feel real bad for Pontiac. I really do. North Farmington right now, this is not the same Raider team that Pontiac was very competitive with the last 2 years. This is not the same North Farmington team. Of course, the Raiders coaching staff, of course, you have the under Coach John Hursting there. The players have been much improved. It's going to be a tough task for Pontiac at Wisner. It's going to be a really, really tough task. That game could get really ugly real quick. That game could get really, really ugly. So we'll see what happens there. So those are the blue games this week. Let's go to the white. Starting with Stony Creek and Troy. Now, this has become a rivalry as of late. Troy's won the last two meetings, including last season's 27-21 victory over at Stony Creek. And then, of course, 2 years ago, Troy won 7-3. Stony Creek's a much different team now than they were last year. And when I look at the Cougars, they have really improved. Really, really improved. And this is a football team that you got to really, really keep an eye on. Stony Creek is they are a sleeping giant waiting to wake up. This team, they believe they should be 3-0 right now. They believe they should be 3-0. Now they're taking on a Troy team that has not scored a point in three games. They have not scored a point. And last week they were shut out 44-0 by Seaholm. They lost 42-0 to Troy, and then 22-0 to Avondale. So I don't know if I see Troy scoring a point in this game against Stony Creek. And Troy still has to play Oak Park and Groves. That's tough. And now let's go to we have Rochester and Seaholm this week in the Maple Forest. Rochester defensively. They got problems on the defense side of football. That's not even a question. Taking on a Seaholm team right now is running on all cylinders. They're playing very well. Even though they're not the deepest team, they got football players. Rochester, this is a team that defensively's got problems. So when I look at Rochester, I mean, they've got to get their defense shored up. They've got to fix that defense. And right now, yes, you played a very tough schedule. I get that. You played Adams, you played Groves, you played Oak Park. That's not easy. But you got to get that defense shored up, especially against Seaholm, a team that's very similar to Adams. Seaholm runs that veer. It's going to be a tough task. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. We got Troy Athens taking on Southfield A&T. We don't know where Athens' head's at after losing 42-7 to Stony Creek. We don't know where their heads are at. Stony Creek just exposed them. They exposed them. A&T, they've got some problems of their own. They've scored 15 points in 2 weeks. 15 points. They played Lake Orion and West Bloomfield. But for a team that does a lot of talking on social media, I think that team should not be talking on social media. They should not. Because, you sit 1-2. You shouldn't be talking. And you got a tough schedule ahead of you. So, when I look at A&T, disappointing and not surprised, kind of put them together for me. Where I have this team at. And in their game, and then of course, your offense is not produced well. You have not. If you scored 15 total points last 2 weeks, that's not good. That is not good. Athens, on the other hand, we're gonna see where they're at. We're gonna see where they're at with them. We're gonna see where they're at. And then you have the big game in the white. Groves at Oak Park. Groves last week looked very good. Put 42 up on Rochester. Oak Park. We knew what they did. They put up 53 to Rochester 2 weeks ago. 64 to Clarkston. Their offense is legit. Their offense is very good. However, the last 2 meetings between the Knights and the Falcons, it's been a defensive struggle. And I expect this game will be a defensive struggle. Both teams have athletes on both sides of football. Both these 2 teams are very good teams. I expect both these 2 teams to make long playoff runs. Of course, both teams will likely be in Division 2. So when I look at Groves' case, I mean, you had that big win 2 weeks ago against West Bloomfield. Now you got to go and play Oak Park, likely for the white title on the line. And you're looking good. I mean, you're looking pretty good. But this is going to be the test. It's going to be the test. If you're Oak Park, this is the test yourselves. Because you guys have been very close with Groves. And I expect it to be a close, low-scoring game. And Oak Park went into Beverly Hills and beat them last year. 13-7. So, if I'm Groves, I think there's more pressure on Groves than there is on Oak Park. But if you're Oak Park, this is a big game for you as well. Because if you win this game, it's going to set you up. Because I think both these teams are going to get multiple home playoff games this year. Multiple. So, it's a big game around the state. It's a big game around the state. Huge game. Huge game. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens when Oak Park takes on Groves. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of sports writers down there. It's gonna be packed over at Night Valley, and that game's a 6:00 kickoff. So make sure, fans, you get down to Night Valley early if you're going down to Oak Park, because that is a 6:00 kickoff. Now let's go from the white to the red. We already talked A&T's match with Troy Athens. Mentioned I already talked A&T already. Rivalry week in the red. I mean, if you also count technically rivalry week in the whole league, but here's some rivalry games to get to know, especially in the red. The first one we're going to talk about is Adams taking on Bloomfield Hills. Adams has won the last 2 meetings against Bloomfield Hills. 2 years ago, it was 54-14. Last season, 24-21 on a very controversial call that went Adams' way in that game. So Bloomfield Hills should be really motivated. But now the question comes, how is Tanner Sozinski? Because he got hurt last week in their 42-21 loss to Oxford. If he's not playing in that game, I expect this game to be a blowout. Adams, they're coming in really upset after losing 36-31 to Lake Orion. They have won both their games at home. They've averaged over 49 points in those 2 games at home against Rochester and Oxford. And they've been scoring late. They've been scoring a bunch of points. I mean, they put up over 60 against Rochester, 31 against Oxford, 31 against Lake Orion. And that says a lot to what Adams is offensively. You got a quarterback in Carter Farish. You have Anthony Petrito. You have Parker Pacat, who had a big game last week against Lake Orion, going for a 71-yard touchdown pass. You have playmakers. Adams has playmakers. And like I said, if Tanner Sozinski is not playing, this is a blowout. If he's playing, I think it's a little bit closer, but I think Adams is the better team on paper. They are the better team. And we know Adams is going to be motivated, and they're going to be coming in with a really bad mood. Let's go now to West Bloomfield, Clarkston. Can you just imagine how big this game is for Clarkston? They're 1-2 right now. Playing 8-game schedule. Have a tough schedule after that. I mean, I talked Clarkston earlier in this podcast. I talked Clarkston. The fact that this team has problems, especially on the defense side of the ball. This team's got big problems. And when I look at Clarkston, this is a must win game for them. Because if they go 1-3, they're in some trouble. Especially when you look at that schedule. You got to go to Oxford. You got to go to Adams. You got Southfield, Lake Orion coming to your place. But this is a game you really need. You really need this game. If you're West Bloomfield, you should be motivated yourselves too. Because you've lost the last 2 meetings to Clarkston, including last year's 28-25 game. And then, of course, they remember the state championship game 2 years ago where they lost 3-2. And that was prior to West Bloomfield basically destroying Clarkston the last time those 2 teams went in the swamp. Now, Clarkston has been the swamp this year. They played in that kickoff classic against A&T, where they did not look very good in that game. Clarkston last week gave up 64 points. That is the most they have ever allowed. That's the most they've ever allowed. I know the last time they allowed this much was 56 points in 1999 against Macomb, Dakota. I know they allowed 49 back in 2000 and back in 2008 against Southfield Lathrop. So when I look at Clarkston, defensively, this team's got issues. They've got some issues. And now they're playing against an A&T team, against a West Bloomfield team, loaded with tons of D1 talent, and they're coming off a tough 17-8 win at Southfield last week. So when I look at Clarkston, they have to win this game because it's not going to get any easier from here on out. If you're West Bloomfield, you got enough motivation against Clarkston. You're going against a program that has won 3 state titles in 7 years. That's going to be a challenge. That's going to be a big, big challenge. But you're at home. You're in the swamp. You're going to have your fans right there. Clarkston has to travel. That's not going to be an easy game for Clarkston. For West Bloomfield, keep doing what you're doing. I think you're fine. Then you have Lake Orion and Oxford. If you're a Dragon fan, you better be motivated to what happened last year. You were humiliated 28-7. You lost to Oxford last year in football, boys basketball, girls basketball, baseball. But this is a whole new year. But if you're a Lake Orion fan, you better be motivated for this game. Oxford's going to be geeked. They're going to be excited. It's their first home game. There's going to be a lot of raw emotion. There's going to be a ton of emotion. It's a rivalry game. So when I look at Lake Orion and Oxford, it's who wants it more. Who wants it more? You throw the records out the window. You throw those records out the window. It's going to be a drag-out, smash-mouth football game. Both those teams, it's going to be a battle in the trenches. When I look at this game on paper, Lake Orion last year had issues with Drew Carpenter. They had a ton of problems with Drew Carpenter. Now I heard they moved in the running back. And now they have Brady Carpenter at quarterback. Yeah, Michael Pullman. Both Drew Carpenter and Pullman were huge last week against Bloomfield Hills. But I'm curious to see what Oxford's going to do, especially their bread and butter has always been pound the rock, but they have ran some option, a.k.a. last year. And then on Lake Orion's case, you're 3-0. You played a brutal schedule. You beat 3 very good football teams. You beat a very good Lapeer team week 1. Then you destroy a South Arts and Tech team. And then you had to beat a very good Rochester Adams team. When you look at Lake Orion, but I like what they said on social media after Saturday night. I like what they said. They didn't get too hyped about themselves. They didn't get too hyped about them. They just focused on next game up. Because when you look at that game with Lake Orion and Oxford, it is a rivalry game. It is a rivalry game. And it's going to be a heck of a battle between those two teams. You can throw the records out the window, as I mentioned. Yes, Oxford's coming in at 1-2. Yes, they've had some tough losses. They lost a tough one to Romeo. They lost a tough one to Adams 2 weeks ago. But that win against Bloomfield Hills is huge for them because it gives them their confidence. If you're Lake Orion, you're going on the road. But I think Lake Orion's been a better team on the road than they've been at Dragon Stadium. And that says a lot. last season, of course, Lake Orion won 3 big games on the road to get in the playoffs. They won at Southfield A&T, one at Adams, and one at Monroe. So this team has been battle-tested on the road. And this year, they went to Lapeer, hostile environment, won that game there. So this is going to be a really interesting game between Lake Orion and Oxford. Really interesting game. My picks for this week, I'm going to go blue first and white then red. Then I'm going to call it a show for the week. I'm going to go blue. I'm going to go Notre Dame Prep over Berkeley. I'm going to go Farmington over Ferndale, North Farmington over Pontiac, and Avondale over Royal Oak. And then the white, I'm going to go Stony Creek over Troy, Seaholm over Rochester. I'm going to take Oak Park over Groves this week, and I'm going to take A&T over Athens. In the red, as mentioned, that said A&T over Athens. West Bloomfield over Clarkston. Adams over Bloomfield Hills, and then Lake Orion over Oxford. Those are my picks for the week. So we'll see what happens going forward this week on the podcast. We're going to keep an eye on everything. Other sports we'll recap briefly. Volleyball, of course, we had the Farmington Mercy Tournament. We had the Novi Tournament. Stony Creek ended up winning the Novi Tournament. And then you had the Farmington Mercy Tournament. Of course, Lake Orion had a really good showing there. Oxford had a good showing. Bloomfield Hills had a good showing as well. So volleyball season off to a very good start. If you want to take a look at the top teams in each of the sports that I have, they're on my blog at sammy@blogspot.com. My top 10 teams for each of the sports, ranging from volleyball, boys soccer, swim and dive, golf, basically all and cross country. Basically all those sports. I have a top 10 rankings on that one as well. If you want to take a look at the official state rankings, I just posted a new blog this week called the Sammy State blog. Of course, I'll be keeping an eye on my top 30 this week around the state. Also keeping an eye on other leagues around across the entire state as well. So you can take a look at that blog. It's at sd46@blogspot.com. If you want to look at the state rankings that I have this week, of course, it's on that blog as well. So we'll see what happens going forward there, heading into the week. Okay, now everybody, I'm going to sign off here. Take care, everybody. Wish everybody best of luck this week in week number 4 for football, and also in the other sports as well. So, this is Sammy here signing off here. Take care. See you all next week, everybody. See you later.